Deepwatch provides innovative managed security services that empower organizations to be more resilient against today's evolving cyber threats. Deepwatch offers game-changing capabilities in managed detection and response, managed endpoint detection and response, and vulnerability management, all delivered through a unique squad model, a dedicated group of security experts that works directly with each client. From managed security operations to threat hunting to continuous measurement of security readiness, Deepwatch is advancing the service of managed security. Measure your SecOps maturity for free by visiting securityweekly.com/Deepwatch. Most breaches are caused by exploiting oversights in basic cybersecurity fundamentals, but complex hybrid multi-cloud infrastructures make cybersecurity hygiene challenging. Red Seal can help. It shows you what's on your network, how it's connected, and the associated risk across public cloud, private cloud, and physical environments. With Red Seal, you'll get control of your cybersecurity fundamentals so you can protect your organization from the inevitable attack vectors and reduce your cyber risk. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/Red Seal.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We will review those monthly and reach out to you once reviewed. You can also do it through Discord too, because we had the last episode we did came through Discord actually, which was a fun way to get the feedback from our listeners. Also, in our October 22nd technical training, we will provide a first look at a new free resource that delivers thousands of remedies as a service to bridge the gap between vulnerabilities found and vulnerabilities fixed. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to see what we have coming up, or visit securityweekly.com/on-demand to view all of our previously recorded webcasts. We did a fantastic webcast with Accurix last week on modeling out your cloud infrastructure and applications and looking at the different threat landscapes overlap. If you didn't get a chance to see that demo, I just, anybody who's deploying cloud, deploying applications in containers, just a fantastic segment.
Gartner has that on their list, Cloud Security Posture Management. We'll talk about it.
Yes. Well, it's kind of what they call it.
That's what they call it, yes.
That's what they call it. It's a little more than that, depending on how you define it.
It would fall in that Gartner bucket, but as typical of Gartner, it would do it a disservice, I think, to squarely put it in that round peg in the square hole, basically.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the CSPMs went after the runtime side. What I think is interesting with Accurix is they look at the static configuration files before you spin up the infrastructure.
So cool.
And monitor it in runtime. So you get that marriage between static and dynamic, which I think is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. All right, some great articles this week. The first one, I just thought this was good, right? A lot of people have heard me talk about the role of the CISO and how I think the role is going to transform over time, away from operational more to governance. This article from Forrester talks about the 6 different CISO types. We had Janan Budge on Business Security Weekly at RSA conference earlier this year, which is part of where I think some of this article came from. But Jason, I thought it was a good way to break down the different types of CISOs and where they thrive.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a lot of it's personality type, right? I mean, at the end of the day. And I
think size of company, too, dictates a lot of these roles.
Culture of company.
Yeah.
Because you could have a small company, right? You could have a culture that they're a smaller company, but the culture doesn't allow you to kind of be that strategic CISO.
Right.
The one thing I do want to point out about this article, at least from my opinion, is you're not pigeonholed into one of these. I feel like you can be a transformational CISO, customer facing at the same time, and hey, maybe be a post-breach CISO, right? And be effective there. So really, you could be multiple pieces of this puzzle. And I would think the most well-rounded CISO plays a little bit in all of these, right?
Yeah. But I think when the company gets big, a lot of these are separate CISO roles, right? You've got your customer-facing CISO, you've got your product CISO, you've got your IT, you've got your compliance. Those may be like 4 or 5 different roles right in there that could really carry the chief security officer.
And I'm starting to see a trend, though, Paul, of BSOs rolling up to CISOs, and you have that business security officer. So they're focused on a business unit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, because I think we're a lot of us are trending towards more functional functionally focused teams across the board, not just in development and DevOps as we've talked about, but I think across the board, quite literally in some cases, right? Where it's focused on a function of the business and it's a cross-functional team. Right.
And just Jace.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say your BSO role reminds me of what I thought would happen in some respects, right? Is that security would have to be embedded in aspects of the business unit themselves, 100%. Right? And it wasn't necessarily going to be a full-blown CISO, but somebody who really understood the business unit and what drove the business models for them, reporting back into, it could have been a CTO role, it could have been a CISO role. It didn't have to be one or the other. But security had to be more aligned to business. And so that's an interesting trend because I think that is critical.
Yeah, it's definitely something I've been starting to see with organizations hiring into that BSO type role. And they have obviously different job names, right? But that's the nature of the beast, is a business unit level security officer, right? Who kind of aligns to that business unit. They understand the business unit, and then they roll up to a more strategic CXO, whatever it may be. Yeah, I've even seen privacy officer, where some of them are rolling up to privacy.
Right. You know? Well, because if privacy is a big part, because you have a lot of consumer data or something like that, privacy may be the bigger driver from a security perspective in that organization. Right. In traditionally, we've seen more of the tactical operational CISOs coming out of the technical side. I knew that skill would have to transform over time, because I'm also seeing the evolution of CTOs taking on aspects of part of broader architecture projects, right? Or maybe the CISO doesn't own some of that tactical or operational stuff. And then, you know, the one on the bottom, the customer facing evangelist, I mean, that's always been Qualys' CISO role, right? Like Ben Carr in that role now. It's always been out to understand the security and be able to evangelize that to their customer base versus more focused on the internal security for Qualys.
And a lot of times you're leveraging security as a differentiator, right? And that's when you're coming out there and being that evangelist where, you know, you're showing your customers that here's what makes us different, right? We're putting security first, right? We have this executive who's going to partner with you and really be that evangelist and get those. A lot of times, from my perspective, my conversation with customers is more along the lines of gathering their requirements. So I understand how to influence the business on the back end.
I've seen that called like a field CISO.
Right? Yep, absolutely.
Because you're out there with customers, like massive collecting that. That's a very important role.
It is. I mean, unless you have that direct communication, and we talked about it in the segment before, unless you have that communication with your customer, you're not going to fully understand the requirements or the expectations they have of you.
And the more customers you get, which is good because you're growing, right? You may need other more difficult it becomes to keep in touch with them.
That's right. 100%.
Exactly. And regardless of the type of CISO you are, what are the 5 habits of highly effective CISOs? So the second article is, it doesn't really matter the role. I mean, this is really focused on communication at the end of the day and collaboration.
And I think it's some of, it's not all of, right? You know, some of the things that I pulled aside that weren't in this list were things like, you know, trust and influence, right? You always have to stay true to your North Star, right? Because ultimately you're building those relationships, and a lot of the influence you're gaining is because of the respect those other leaders have for you. So don't trade that off, right? Don't ever trade off your North Star. So you're going to come into a situation where you may have to say no to somebody you have a really, really good relationship with, right? But realize that you're in this position because leaders in the organization trust you, right? They trust why you're there. So don't ever take your North Star or your morals, right, and push them aside for the relationship piece, to keep people happy, to appease people, right? You're there for a reason, right? And they'll respect you more. Other business unit leaders will respect you more if you keep your moral compass.
Yeah, I like to think I've stuck to my guns. When you said that, I kind of did a mental check. Like, no, I because you do build relationships with me. Like, I stick to my guns. Like, and then push comes to shove, I'm like, yeah, no, like I can't get on board with. Like, here's why. Like, I can't get on board with that, right? And I think that's largely going to be in the conversation we just had on the show, right? More so the role of security people, right? Is you've done the research. And when you do come across those decision points, security is going to be the one to say, no, this is going to break the build. This is a privacy violation that is way too risky, right? It's going to be at those decision points that we've struggled with over time. When you go back 20 plus years, those were hard. It's better to be in a world today where you can have a lot more influence and sometimes control over those decisions.
And one of the other ones I added was be business savvy, right?
You have to.
And I think those two play on each other, because a lot of times I'll find myself in conversations where I know the answer to their specific question is no.
Right.
But the way I bring it back to the table is, all right, instead of talking about the pathway to get there, let's talk about the outcome. Let's talk about the outcome you're trying to achieve. And maybe we're not going to take the exact road that you're looking to go down, but let's see if there's an alternative path to get you to that outcome.
But I also think, Jason, it's important to know what that business unit or team does.
Yes,
right?
That's being business savvy. Because now you can put recommendations out there.
Yes, but I like your outcome focus. But I think to get to that point, you have to know what all your business units do, and you may not at first. And if you can have some foresight and know that they're probably going to come to a security crossroads or whatever, or take whatever opportunity you can. I do this at the university all the time, right? Because air quotes, business units, right? It's a university.
Right.
There's all kinds of different departments that are part of a non-profit business, right? But there's a lot of research. There's a lot of different departments that are supporting all different kinds of activities. Then you've got the whole operations of a 144-acre campus and tens of thousands of people, right? And I'm like, so what are you doing to control systems? What is your daily operations? And understanding that makes you, I think it's a great habit. I don't know if it's on the list, Matt, but I think it's a great habit that you have to develop if you're going to be a really good CISO. You got to understand walk in everyone's shoes. Yeah,
I think it was one of the last ones where it says define organizational risk appetite through collaboration with decision makers. That's part of it. Yeah. Right? Where you're learning them. You're learning what they're open to, what they're not open to, how their business operates.
Because when they come ask to do something, you should already have a pretty good understanding of why they're asking for because they're building that product and they're moving really fast because it's this part of the business that.
And to be honest with you, university is a great example of that type, because they're little business units inside of a big business unit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly.
Yes. And I think it's not spelled out here specifically, but those CISOs that understand the business or business savvy and effectively collaborate and communicate across also build a really good culture for security, where when you have to say no, people understand, okay, I get it, right? Because it has been a trusted communication, collaboration across the environment. That culture makes it easier, I think, long-term to succeed as a CISO. And it's some of those other elements that allows you to build that trusted culture.
No, great. And again, it doesn't always have to be no.
No,
right?
Right.
It's what are you trying to get to? What's the end game here? Let's learn about the end game and see if we can help you, right? Because I do. Honestly, I really hate saying no definitively, line in sand, we're not crossed. Sometimes it does have to happen, right? But many times there's a solution, and you can come to it together.
If that business unit is building their systems on Windows XP, your answer is probably going to be no.
Exactly. 100%.
But that's a lot of the challenges that many of us have faced and still face to this day, is even though you understand what the team does, you understand security, you're trying to help others understand security, but really they just want to push this thing out and it's running on Windows.
And it's funny, you remind me, because a lot of times I talk to my team and I'm like, that one is VBS worthy. And they're like, VBS, verbal bitch slap.
Yep.
Sometimes it just has to happen.
Yes. And cybersecurity is not a four-letter word because it's made up of a bunch of four-letter acronyms. We talked about a few of them earlier. This was an interesting article because it's funny. They said it's not a four-letter word, and then they rattle off all these four-letter acronyms.
Right.
You can go SIM, SOAR, CSPM. We can go on and on and on, right?
SASE. The new one.
SASE's a new one.
Yeah, SASE's the new one.
And it is sassy.
So you're right. It's not a four-letter word. It's a combination of four-letter acronyms. Come on, get it right.
Yeah, this article was pretty good. I took it from more of the non-security focused business units, right? Because we don't talk about security because we don't fully understand it. Well, if you're a security professional, you're trying your damnedest to understand as much as you can. But outside of your business unit, then folks aren't talking about it because maybe they don't understand it. They can't see it, and it's terrifying. Okay, well, I think it's say easy, do hard. That's why people don't talk about it.
Right.
Honestly. And
because if they don't understand the threat, then there's no risk. right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
It's,
but more and more, I've been getting questions, and I think this has happened more and more just because it's becoming a lot more mainstream. Most people are asking the question. Like, my neighbor asked me yesterday, like, I have my old router. Like, can I just throw that out? Or should, like, I reset it to factory defaults? Like, so people are starting to become in tune because of mainstream media, the news cycle, right, of threats out there, right? And the question becomes more so not if there's a threat. They know there is. The question is more, what's the likelihood, right? And what's the impact is more of the question, which is, I think, a very positive thing for cybersecurity. Now, I did advise them. I'm like, just reset to factory defaults, right? Because that's an easy thing to do, and it offers some protection. Because there's things, I mean, inside of routers and NVRAM, and say if you were to get them pulled apart, you might be able to do that. And there's password reuse and all that stuff. So, yeah, by all means, do that, right? Do you have to melt it in the fire pit in your backyard? Probably not. Probably not a good thing to breathe in either. Yeah, right. I mean, could be fun, but yeah.
Well, you factory reset it. It's a simple red button on the back, and then you just take a sledgehammer to it and smash it. You're good.
Yeah, see, I was going to say, put it about 50 yards out and put some lead through it.
You could do that. Yeah, I mean,
you could do that too.
You got to make sure, and I didn't get into this with him, but you got to make sure you hit the flash chip. Like, you really have to find the flash chip, because you can put bullet holes all around that flash chip, and I'm going to go there with a desoldering wick, and I'm going to rip that flash chip off. Awesome. And you can, but again, someone with a lot of skill.
Incendiary rounds. Right? Incendiary rounds.
And a lot of motivation. That's the thing. Like, is a nation-state country after maybe what's on your router? I mean, maybe, but most likely not, right?
Yeah, Jason, most of the ranges have the little clips to hold paper targets. 100%. I'm not sure it will hold an actual router.
Double-sided duct tape, baby. It'll hold it
maybe
on
there you go.
Put it on a steel target.
7 strategies for better group decision making. I thought this was good because Paul and I are in this interesting transition period right now after the acquisition of Cyber Risk Alliance. And the number of meetings that have popped up on our calendars, right?
It's a lot. Yeah.
It is a lot, right? Because we're making decisions
more than we had.
More than you used to.
True.
But it also seems like a lot, because don't forget, our days are prep calls with guests and shows as well. So we already have, I mean, they're meetings, but not like the meetings we're talking about where you have to have like group decisions, right? They're very specific.
Right. Yeah, they're very specific. We're talking about, integration of the financials and how we're going to do quoting and all that stuff through a new system. We're talking about labs and the whole startup of that stuff, right? And so I thought this was a very appropriate article. I'm like, I like some of the suggestions in here.
Totally.
Keep the team, keep the team small.
Absolutely. Right? Decision by committee sucks. Decision by committee sucks.
But we've had, I mean, to talk about our journey, right? And what's a positive thing is we've had a lot of great conversations about, like, what's the next meeting and who needs to be there? Yeah. Like, does this person really need to be there? Are they optional, or are we just going to keep it small? And I think to this point, we've done a good job of keeping it small and focused. Yeah. And the team understands that, at CRA very well, you can tell.
And I mean, it depends on what type of meeting you're having too, right? I mean, if you're having a strategy session, you want the strategic folks in the room who are going to make the big decisions, right? And then from there, you kind of push the meetings downstream to the execution folks or whatever the case may be. And I mean, keep that team small so you can make those strategic decisions, but also be open to the feedback coming back upstream because those folks executing may say, it doesn't really work that way.
Right. No, exactly right. And whenever Paul and I are in a meeting, we are instantly the strategic dissenters. So we've got that one covered.
Nice. So you play the devil's advocate that they were talking about in here?
Sometimes.
All the time. I mean, we do. I think we have to, right? I mean, it's interesting with both of our backgrounds coming in. Look, we both have opinions on what works and what doesn't work, right? And as long as you're open and honest about those, you almost kind of play a dissenter role just naturally in some respect. Right?
Yeah. Challenge the process.
Which we do.
Which is good.
Yeah,
I like the one that says don't over rely on experts, right? Because expert opinion is a great thing, but those experts represent a certain domain. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have the context of the environment that this decision is being made in. So that may play as well. Take those opinions, right? Take them, but put them in the context of the decision you're trying to make, right? Or the program you're trying to build or whatever the case may be.
I mean, yeah, from security, like, we know that things are labeled as bad, right? Like, we know TikTok could be a really bad application if you're running an older version of, Tomcat or anything from Adobe. Like, instantly, like, the experts are going to go, based on our experience, that's bad. But again, you've got to understand the context. You've got to understand the threat, likelihood, impact, and do the risk equation, which I think makes your point valid, Jason, in that you need the other, like, why are we trying to use this? To your earlier point, what's the outcome? Those type of things have to factor into it.
Yeah.
Although, if it's Adobe, probably still a no.
Probably still a no. It might be end of life soon anyways or something.
Yeah, Flash is going away for sure. But.
Yeah, it is. But this is a really good article for people that have to do these kind of group decision meetings. I think it gives you some really good guidelines.
It's good.
I think this article is way better than Gartner's next article on the top 10 key security projects for the rest of the year. I
didn't see SASE in here.
I wasn't overly impressed with this list.
Didn't they create that term?
They did. That's why I was wondering why. I looked at it, I'm like, wait a minute. Literally the terminology that they just created, and they're pushing so much behind, they didn't even include it in their list.
They didn't include it in their list. And some of these I look at, and I'm like, really? Yeah. We're back to risk-based vulnerability management?
Right.
Really? That's where we're going to focus now?
It says CARTA inspired. What is that acronym? I didn't look it up.
CARTA is their continuous process that Neil McDonald rolled out a few years back. I can't remember the full extent of the acronym, but it's like continuous assurance response. Anyways, whatever
Simplify cloud access controls, whatever that means.
Yeah. Now CSPM's in here, vague. Paul. Cloud Security Posture Management showed up on the list.
I mean, is SASE like if CSPM and CASB had a love child, would it be SASE?
You got to throw SD-WAN in there.
You got to throw SD-WAN in there. You're right. SD-WAN.
SD-WAN has to be part of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would have to be. But I mean, there are a couple on this list that I think make sense. But okay, remote workers, we get it. Yeah. DMARC, we should do it because of phishing email attacks. Totally get it, right? But then you've got some cloud stuff in here. We're seeing application. There's passwordless authentication. Are you kidding me? We haven't even gotten the base identity and access stuff down pat yet. And you're going to push us all the way to passwordless authentication.
But then they go into the hot tub time machine and say data classification and protection. Like, shoulda, woulda, coulda been doing that.
Yeah, that should have been like 15 years ago.
That's what I'm saying.
So this list, I'm just looking at it and I'm like, I got to rip this thing apart because I'm like, really? This is where we're going to spend our time? In the current environment, I'm just not sure some of these make a lot of sense. Maybe they're easy, but still, I'm not sure these are the priorities organizations. Right. So people, when you read this article, take it with a grain of salt. Right. I think there are some better aspects to focus on. I think you have to secure your remote workforce. I think you have to look at identity and privilege and make sure you're locking these accounts down. I think multi-factor authentication needs to be top of the list for all of your services. I think addressing your email and DMARCs from a security phishing perspective are key. Some of these other ones, I'm not there.
I think identity and access management needs to be like a whole segment and or article that we do better than what Gartner's trying to recommend here.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
Because a lot of it's hinting towards aspects of identity and access management, right? Because you still need privileged access. You need multi-factor authentication. You should be doing something to reduce the password use and strengthen the weaknesses. Yep. Maybe it's passwordless, but that's going to depend on a lot of other factors as well, and the application of all of those, right? I mean, there's many, many different aspects to identity and access management. You need to look at what you're doing and see where what you're missing and prioritize that as a global, higher level project, right? Not just go, well, we'll be more secure if we do passwordless, because that may not be true.
And one that's not on this list, which leads me to my next article, is the whole supply chain side and the third-party management. And as people are spinning up new services, adopting new stuff, who's looking at those? Not anywhere on this top 10 list from Gartner. The second article talks about, look, these are some of the challenges security folks need to think about when they go to sign up for that next SaaS contract.
Yeah.
What controls can you review? What, what's the fourth, fifth, sixth party risk profile look like? I mean, that's not even anywhere on Gartner's list.
Which, by the way, is so important these days, right? And
Yes.
I read this article and I said, this is a testament to how security needs to do a better job of finding a way to get baked into the process. They have to get baked into the process in the beginning of the process, right? Whether it be onboarding new partners, onboarding new vendors, new contractors, manufacturers, looking at client MSAs, vendor MSAs, T's and C's. There's so much legal language that gets put out there to organizations when they're partnering with whomever or buying from whomever. But if you're looking at it, there's so much security, compliance, privacy language, limited liability language, right? I mean, you're sitting there, you're reading some of this, and I have the luxury of having to, partner with my legal team and read a lot of these documents, right? And I mean, sometimes you go cross-eyed and you have to bring in the attorneys to say, what the hell does this mean? I mean, there are organizations basically saying, listen, there's zero liability. Even if I am the threat vector for you to get breached, sorry, can't do anything, right? You have to read that stuff. You have to. I mean, even down to breach notification. They're putting breach notification language in these MSAs where you may not be in compliance with your own breach notification policies.
So if I go to a provider like Amazon could say, well, if we get breached, we don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
And then your regulations or laws say if there's a breach, I have to tell my clients.
Not always necessarily we don't have to tell you. Well, there's language in some of those that say we'll tell you by our timeline, which may violate your breach notification.
The timeline,
right? Or they may say, if it happens, we have zero liability whatsoever. We'll tell you, but guess what? You can't sue us.
Yeah.
You can't reap the benefits of a lawsuit or anything like that, right?
Right. And I think the challenge here is that the business units are making some of these decisions on which SaaS vendors are looking at. And if security's not business savvy, back to conversation earlier.
Right. They're going to go with the cheapest one.
Exactly. And security is going to be handed this contract and say, well, how do we secure it now? Well, too late, guys. This thing's already off and running. This was the old problem back in the shadow IT days, right? Yeah. When we were all talking shadow IT and all this stuff's being spun up by the business unit. Look, this hasn't gone away. What we're doing, though, is we are adopting some of these additional services to keep the business running in a very remote world. But is security getting a chance to look at these contracts before they get signed, or are they putting the organization at higher risk?
Yeah. Are you proactive or are you an afterthought? And my whole approach is become proactive, get embedded in the process as early on as you possibly can. And that may be reaching out across the lines to legal, right? To your vendor management team, to your product operations team, wherever that first contract comes into play, when they start vetting the vendor, get infused there. That's where you want to start getting visibility into those contracts, those T's and C's, those MSAs. And I mean, they have legal addendums, right? That get put in. You may have the higher end MSA that has absolutely nothing to do with security, compliance, privacy, none of it. It's just the legal verbiage. And then there's like Addendum C, which is privacy. Addendum D, which is security operations. Addendum E, right? So you have to get that entire document set to take a look at.
Yeah. Sounds like you've done this before, Jason.
I've done it so many times, my friend. But it's that necessary evil because, again, you don't want to be stuck on your heels 5 years from now when something happens and you didn't get that level of visibility and you couldn't articulate to the business that level of risk.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And then 5 years from now, they're going to say, hey, why didn't you tell us about this? And you're going to say, because I never read it? No,
right. I mean, right. Yeah, not a good answer.
Not a good answer, right?
Right. Yeah. Back to those different CISO types. That's one you don't want to be in.
Nope.
You're the potential breach CISO that just got replaced by the post-breach.
That's right. And honestly, those good relationships with legal, procurement, right? Your product operations team, vendor management, having those good relationships. You don't even know how many times I'll get things punted over to my team because we weren't in that communication string. Hey, wait a minute. Has Jason's team looked at this yet? right? Which is great. It's a great position to be in, but you have to work at getting that level of relationship to get there.
Yeah, you got to build the communication, collaboration,
Yep.
the trust, the
Yep.
culture to be able
Yep.
to see those contracts when
That's right.
somebody doesn't involve you.
100%.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.